Hello, Tom.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. And you?
Not too bad, thanks.
Where are you located, may I ask you?
New Zealand.
Ah, wow, it should be late for you, no?
It's not too late, 8:30.
Okay.
And where are you?
I'm in Berlin, Germany.
Ah, okay, opposite.
10:30 in the morning.
Yes. Yeah, that's always very interesting to have a meeting somewhere in Europe for me. Oh. Who else? Dylan, Adam. Okay, let's start. Yeah, so good news is the PLCMI is green, so I will keep rebasing every 2 to 3 days. But feel free to as well. And Camille, yes, I know we can use that script, but that doesn't appear in the earlier commits.
So I'm kind of wondering, because like this, you kind of mentioned as well that like this MR has very terrible performance.
Yes.
Should we just, I don't know, can we like maybe commit squash all of the changes it's gonna break Adam work? Or maybe like squash some set of the commits and like open a new MR to make it much easier. Because right now, like
Yes.
I think like it's even painful to look at the changes. So I mean, I can do it. The question is like, would you like this approach, like that we squash some set of the commits, maybe like half of them, to keep Adam work still like be rebaseable, or maybe like even rebase Adam work, and like open a new MR on which we would be looking at, because right now it's pretty terrible experience.
Yeah, it's horrible. I tried squashing some. I'm just worried that if we squash too much, it becomes harder to fix conflicts because you don't know what we did. Yeah, so the small commits are very nice, very easy to fix conflicts. So I think performance-wise, it's going to be bad anyway, even if we have less commits, because the diff is still quite big. So it's a big problem. But yes,
yeah, so I'm kind of like wondering, because like that, the structure SQL like is the majority of the changes right now. Anyway, maybe maybe I will just try to open a new MR and see if it actually improves the performance. Maybe like from what I saw in the browser, like a lot of these problems were due to many pipelines being there. So maybe this is the main problem, and maybe it's gonna be acceptable if you just open as is as a new MR.
Yep, sounds good. Yep. And then if you have the time, if you can move the POC script to the first commit, then we can use that. I've been manually doing it, which is fine. Yeah.
As for the to-dos, I kind of like look one line by line, and I think that some of these to-dos are, like majority of these to-dos are right now related to tests. So I didn't cover these to-dos, I covered only the one concerning actual application.
Yes, there's half of those is specs. And then 1/4 is database. Yeah, there's maybe about 10 or so where it's application. So
there is like with deployable to do where it's missing, but I think it's kind of related to an envs support. There is last visible pipeline, it was also envs. Axon taggable, I'm missing like the link there because it's already created.
okay, cool.
Okay, I'm kind of thinking that I'm missing some links because like one related for the queuing, they are also related to the queuing that is covered by the APAC to some extent. Okay,
Yeah,
I will walk through these to-dos. I'm just not thinking that there is significantly more than what we have now.
Yeah, agree. So yeah, let's open a new MR. I don't know how often we rebase. I've been just looking maybe every 4 days. If it reaches 1,000 commits, then we rebase. If it's not, then
I'm not sure. I would likely propose just like trying that once a week, because like I don't expect so many things to change over a period, and like each rebase gonna be associated with some cost of like fixing the failure. So maybe we don't need to do it that often. I would look if we can do it not that often. I think it would be, we would have more time for the rest.
Yeah, we don't have to do it that often. I agree. At least once a week is fine.
I might not have all the context that you're discussing, but I'm kind of thinking, and we probably have issues already talking about this, but part of rebasing that is learning that people have introduced new problems, and what we should hopefully be aiming towards is preventing people from introducing new problems, like as in introducing new join queries or so on. I know Adam is working on preventing or detecting nested transactions, but do we have, should we be prioritizing dynamic analysis that runs in CI that prevents any new additions of join queries? So we're not got a moving target.
I think it's still pretty hard right now to do it, but as soon as we, let's say, embrace CI application record stuff, it should be way more straightforward to discover things doing cross-boundary joins, but it's still pretty tricky, to be honest, like to discover these cross joins.
Well, I'm wondering if we, if our aim is to fix all the cross joins before we can introduce CI, before we can make CI fail when people introduce a new cross join. That seems like the straightforward and easy path, but it also could lead to a moving target that we never reach. So that is a risk. I mean, maybe we're moving faster than people are adding cross joins, and we have a lot of communication telling people to stop adding cross joins, but it's just a thought that we could end up falling behind. Maybe it's low risk because people don't add these joins that often. We have database reviewers that review all the new queries and they know about this. For the most part, pretty low risk that people don't add more faster than we can clean them up. So
I'm kind of curious because maybe one way to see these things through is like if we rebase this MR for, let's say, for the next 3 or 4 subsequent weeks, we're gonna see like how many of those would be let's say being read, and maybe this would be indicative of like that how much of the safeguards we need to focus right now versus focus on the big picture.
yeah,
Because right now I think there is no like a great answer how we can prevent cross joins today before introducing schemas.
Right. So I think what you're saying is that as we rebase, we will learn if we're getting closer or further away from the target. As we rebase, we'll be bringing in fixes that are being merged. So we'll get less to-dos, less red. And then if we start to see we're getting more red and more to-dos, our to-do list is growing, then we are learning that we have a problem with people moving faster than we can.
Yes, because now, like, if you would have to discover cross joins, the best way would be really to focus on getting schema work be done, because this would be really like probably like the most accurate answer that would prevent further cross joins being added into tests.
It is, but you're still left with the problem where you say, okay, well, I can't merge this schema will fail, will fail if cross joins. I can't merge that code to CI until I've fixed all of the examples. So you still got this possible moving target problem where like some kind of dynamic analysis like Rubocop, where you can have an ignores list, would allow us to merge now without fixing all the problems. But it's difficult, but to me, it seems reasonably straightforward. I could imagine something that intercepted all active record queries and used a SQL parser to interpret the names of all tables. And if you reference any table that contains CI underscore, then every table you reference also has to be CI underscore. I mean, I haven't looked into that, but it seems like that shouldn't be too tricky. Then that becomes an active record interceptor for all of our CI jobs. Then it checks a YAML file or whatever with an ignores list of queries and raises an error if it's not in the ignored list. Maybe there'll be some trickiness with how you actually define something as ignored, but maybe it could be, the names of the tables, or it could be the file that is under test. You probably use the aspect test syntax or something. I don't know.
I mean, like one way probably how we could approach like the current offenses is like create a code construct that would allow you to please, let's say, forbidden cross joins within a given context of the execution, and that would be linked like to the issue. So if someone would have to introduce that, you would have to follow the same pattern, something similar like active record-based transaction, or maybe it would be allow cross joins across schemas or something.
Right. So
where you have to clearly mark that with the issue, and this is easy to discover. This would be probably like the way to mark the pieces that is broken today in the transition period that would prevent the future ones.
yeah, well, as we learned from Rubocop, that is effective when you have only like, a few hundred, but if it's thousands of such blocks, then it's not feasible to add them inline as Rubocop comments, but in your case, this would be nested blocks syntax. That would be feasible for 100. It would be ugly for us to have these 100 in the code, but they'd also act as a to-do list and link to the issues and everything. So I think it's not a bad idea, and we don't actually think that we've got that many based on the grep that Tong's done. So maybe turning all of those to-dos into code blocks that link to issues, and disallowing any more of them using the similar dynamic analysis technique I described could also be a tactic.
Okay, so then my question is really like, what is faster like to achieve and more reasonable? Like, because we need to like focus on schemas, we're still gonna need to probably introduce the syntax anyway that we are discussing, or do we pursue the syntax right now with some alternative approach that is outside of usage of schemas to discover cross joins?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer that, what is that code block syntax logics? It could be tricky to do the query. I mean, the query testing to see if it's a bad query may be trickier than what I'm imagining in my head, but if I think about that whole thing through, it seems a lot simpler to implement than the schema stuff. And
so the schema stuff doesn't have to be chicken and egg. The schema stuff actually can be, a lot of the building blocks can be committed you just have to change the search path to search everything before we disallow it.
Yeah, the chasing a moving target problem I'm describing, I mean, maybe I just misinterpreted what you were saying there, but the chasing a moving target problem I'm imagining is about rebasing that MR and less about us introducing the schema syntax. The concern I have is you can't introduce the schema syntax into CI. You can't say CI is going to use the two separate schemas and prevent cross joins until all tests are passing. Like we just can't.
Yeah, we can. I think we can. We can either merge in the schema thing with just the GitLab CI and public altogether, or we can merge in the schema with a separate set of parallel jobs, I think.
Okay, so you're imagining we separate our RSpec test suite into tests that have the schema search path separated. Those are the ones that are compliant, and the ones that are not compliant, they will just use a combined search path in the test.
No, it's more like how we have PG11 and PG12 tests. They're just duplicates of each other. So we have schema search path and not schema search path. And the future state is we just allow it to fail for now. And we can just merge that.
If we have allow failure, then people can introduce it in merge requests and not notice it failing.
Yes, but then we can write a very simple job to gather things up together.
Well, we'll be back to chasing the same problem, which is we need something that compares the previous state to say you haven't introduced more regressions. Like it's okay, allow failure, but you can't introduce new failures. So it ends up being the same practical where we have a list of the failures that we're okay with.
Yes. My thinking is not too much, but if it's a lot, then it's very hard to handle. It's definitely a lot, very much to handle.
Okay, I kind of get where you're going in that, like, okay, we could use schema search path as the tool for what I'm describing, which is some dynamic analysis that lets you know of new failures, as opposed to implementing a SQL parser to do it, which may be heuristic and not as accurate as the schema search path option. And I think that's fine too. But we do possibly introduce also like a large cost to expanding our test suite, but maybe it's not so bad because it's just, let's say, RSpec unit tests.
Yeah, that's why I want to stop running PG11 at least. I think we got rid of it.
We can take the spot of PG11 for our other testing. Yeah, I don't feel strongly about that. I kind of also like the dynamic analysis and code block syntax, and that it also like makes it ugly in the code and aware that this is a non-compliant piece of code that needs to be fixed as well. Like they're kind of better than comments to have a code block with a link to an issue. But I also feel like implementing a heuristic SQL parser that lets us know if they violate the cross joins is probably not as good as the schema option, which we have to pursue anyway. So how would we know? Yeah, I just don't know how to implement something that says this set of tests this is a new test failure that wasn't in the previous one. I think that from what I've seen with the security features that try to do this stuff, like you've introduced a new vulnerability in this merge request. All of these things have like these signature fingerprinting problems where you get all these false positives, like, oh, this MR has introduced 2,000 security vulnerabilities. Like I fear we're going to go down that road if we try to implement the schema search path. You can't introduce new failures. If we go with just allow failure, then nobody will ever notice it because there's hundreds in the pipeline of things that nobody pays attention to. It's huge. People aren't going to check that.
I'm kind of thinking that whatever approach we take, it needs to be working in the context of the current tests. So like if you have a test violating, it should fail the given tests in the current test suite that we have, because then like comparing two different test results, it's gonna be pretty nasty. But if you have like your PG12 unit running, it's gonna show you that this test is simply it's not working in the given context.
I
The
don't know
question
how to
is
make
like,
the schema search path testing strategy work with that until we get all of it green.
the schema search path, like getting this to work, like I think the biggest challenge right now is like on the infrastructure side, on getting these right. Because on the development side, it doesn't seem that hard thing to do, but getting the let's say the proper search path being assigned for the current connection, I think this is really like the main challenge to figure out how to solve that.
On the development side, my concern is we can't merge like I'm thinking from the CI perspective, we can't merge schema search paths such that you have CI in one connection and default or whatever it's called in the other one. We can't merge that to be the way that our CI is configured until we have CI green under all joins working. But I don't know, you might be talking about a different problem when you're talking about infrastructure there.
I think you're right about that.
I don't think we need to act on this now. Like we could see if we're falling behind. The concern I have is just like, okay, if we want to be aware that if we're falling behind, the technique we need to approach this is like the Rubocop technique, where you have all of these allowed failures, but you can't introduce a new one. And they're all whitelisted ahead of time for all the ones we know about, and they all link to issues. So we can wait. We can wait a week and tackle this then if we see rebasing getting further behind with our greps and to-dos or just red tests.
Yeah, we have to see. And unfortunately, some of this is some of the things that we skipped is not cross joins. Some of them are just pure, just holding that just does not work, for example. So kind of look at it, and then some of them are just pure SQL failures as well. So again, it's a different.
Yeah, the description, the thing I'm talking about may only actually be a subset of what is 120 things today, but I may only be talking about like 40 of those, and then it's really not that worth.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
So that's 140, and I just rebased 1,000 commits and nothing. The pipeline is still green, so that's one data point. So hopefully it's not that bad over the next 3 weeks.
In the interest of efficiency, then my suggestion of introducing that in CI is probably something we can wait and not tackle now. Tackle the things we know we need to fix and just assume people aren't going to keep making it worse. People have been informed pretty widely about the problem, and they should mostly know not to introduce it. And we have database reviewers that should also be checking this.
I'm kind of looking at, we have PG query loaded, and maybe this is the way like to check as part of the current query what tables are referenced. And actually there is like this handy .tables method that gives you like out of the current query or tables reference in the given query. So maybe this is something that we could use for this discovery plus prevention.
Yeah, that's pretty much the direction I was going in. Somebody pointed me to that gem a while back and said, yeah, it can interpret the query. So yeah, if you just get .tables, and it should just be like .all start with CI or .none start with CI.
Then we just instrument the SQL.
Yes,
yeah,
I actually tried something like that, and it kind of gives me CI pipelines, and it seems to work well with the subqueries. I don't know about the CTE, but probably it's gonna work as well.
There's a risk of false positives, I guess, if they name a table. Like, what happens if you use a named table in that query? Does it give you that name as well? Because like somebody might name the CI build table as T, and in fact Rails may do that, and are we going to end up with T being in the list?
Okay, let's project as T, where T. It's still projects. It doesn't consider renames.
Okay, that seems.
It actually
pretty reliable.
tries to find the underlying set of tables. I will give it a try. I will try to inject this PG query into PostgreSQL adapter on what executed queries are, and see if this is something that can be used. I'm kind of like wondering about the name params, but seems to be ignoring them as well. So maybe it's gonna just work pretty straightforward.
Nice.
I did try it before. It works most of the time. There are a few special cases when it just raises an exception because it cannot parse the query, but it's very rare.
Do you have some like comment issue from the prior investigation with that, or do you have that detail somewhere?
PG query. I will try to find it and send it to you.
Cool. It would be great. Seems to be also pretty performant. It's only 0.3 milliseconds for parsing that.
Yeah, it basically includes PostgreSQL into as a shared library in C, so it's pretty fast. We also use this for when we send the exceptions and the sequence to what is it, Sentry, to sanitize it and remove the customer data. So, and for that it also works well.
All right, I'm going to jump off for dinner. Thanks for the chat, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.